everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today. It's brilliant to see a strong turnout for what we hope is going to be a really important conversation. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mel Barnett, and I've had the pleasure of being the MD of Public Sector Resourcing for the past 8 years. So I'm actually really thrilled to get to introduce this really important topic today. As we all know, AI is already shaping or reshaping how we work, both in our private lives and, of course, across the public sector too, and everything we do. And I think we know that AI is impacting everything from how we design services to how we recruit, how we train, how we support. Hey, guys, if you wouldn't mind just going on mute, that would be great. Just a bit of feedback there. Thank you. So as I was saying, how we train and how we support the workforce. So AI isn't something that's on the horizon. We actually know it's happening right now. And the reality is, unfortunately, adoption isn't equal in the rise of AI. So we're actually seeing clear differences in people's levels of confidence and access and usage. And if we don't actively address it, we really do risk creating workforces where opportunity and perhaps progression and influence aren't shared equally. So today's session is about getting ahead of that challenge. We're bringing together perspectives to explore how AI is impacting the female talent lifecycle, and that's specifically in the public sector, and what inclusive AI adoption really looks like in practice, and importantly, what we can do differently as leaders. So first, you're going to hear from Rakhi Sachdeva from Microsoft, who has been advocating at the centre of government to shape the AI workforce strategy. And then we'll move into our panel session that's going to be hosted by Scott Hollands, who is the head of recruitment, head of recruit, train, deploy at PSR. And Scott will be joined by Sophie Creese from HeyFlow. Welcome to Sophie. Anna Brailsford from Code First Girls. Hi, Anna. And Erica Titchener from AMS as well. So together, our panel will share practical insights. Just pop yourselves on mute, guys. Thank you. We'll share practical insights on what's changing, what's working, and what we need to focus on next. And I'm sure it's set to be a fantastic, thought-provoking discussion. And I hope you'll come away with some inspiration, some insights, some practical ideas to help shape outcomes for the female digital talent within your own organisations. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Rakhi to open our session. Over to you, Rakhi.
Good morning, everyone. As Mel said, my name is Rakhi, and I want to start with probably an assumption, because there are 50 of us, so I'm not going to ask us to poll or anything, but I do believe almost everyone in this room who has taken out time to join this conversation today has used an AI tool this week. Just give me a thumbs up, like, or something, just so that we know what's happening, if that's an option. Perfect. And I'm seeing lots of likes. That is amazing. Everybody's tuned in, everybody's listening. And this is a common response that you hear if you are being asked this question across government or even more broadly. Everybody's using a chatbot, Copilot, some sort of research tool, something that helps them summarize information faster. But I think the gap here is that far fewer of us are certain or are feeling confident that we are using it the right way. And that gap between using AI and feeling confident to use it, feeling allowed to use it right, is what I really want to talk about for the next 15 minutes. Because this gap that I just then mentioned is very quietly deciding who gets ahead in the age of AI. And let me start with a very short story. So last month, I work with government organizations on their AI strategy. And last month, I saw with someone, let's call her Bridget. I sat down with Bridget. She has spent 20 years in the department. And she had access to Copilot for months. So she had Copilot open on one side of her screen, and she had a Word document open on the other side of the screen, where she was writing everything by hand first, and then she was pasting it back in Copilot. And I saw her doing it, and I just asked myself this question: why is she not doing it the right way? And I asked her, do you know there is a better way? There's a shortcut to how you do this. And she said, I know there is, but I don't really think that I know how to do it properly. So the point of the story is she had the tool, but she did not have the confidence in herself that I am using it right. And I have met hundreds of Bridgets, and probably I've been one at some stage of my life. So with that, I am Rakhi Sachdeva. I lead AI workforce strategy here in the UK for Microsoft. And right now, I work with government departments, ministerial departments on how AI can really shape the future of work. So whilst I have this front row seat, I also do this not just with a technology lens, because I really am curious to watch who leans into this technology and who quietly steps back. And I can tell you from my experience, there is a pattern. And if we move to the next slide, let me just show you why it matters. So what you see on the slide, just do one more click. 123 years. That's what you are seeing probably on your screen right now. And for decades, if we would have been in person, I would have asked you this question: what do you think this number represents? But if you have chat open, I'm more than happy for you to type in, what do you think this number represents here? I want to share this because for decades, we have measured progress in years, and AI is really changing workplaces in months now. These 123 years, if you click next, it's the number of years that the World Economic Forum is highlighting that it's going to take with today's pace to reach global gender parity. And you and I both know that AI is not going to wait 123 years. And these 123 years, if it still hasn't registered, that's not me, that's not my daughter, that's not her daughter either. So 3 generations, and at today's pace, we still won't get there. So I just want to make sure that we all understand that we are at this sort of hinge moment where AI is arriving in workplaces faster than any technology ever did. And not over decades, the changes that we are seeing in the workplaces, it's literally happening every day, if not over months. So as we go through the next few minutes, I want to make sure that the focus is not just on tools and technology. It's making sure that we as leaders really understand who gets to thrive in the world where these tools are being built. And that's why I think all of you in this room are here today. And this conversation, this leadership question really, really belongs in this room because it's something we all together can only unlock. So if you move on to the next slide, thank you. And again, reiterating that when we are talking about AI changing workplaces in days and months now, that means decisions that we would take over the next 12 to 24 months could either compress that journey, could either compress those 123 years, or they also have an opportunity to widen that gap. And AI, I think, has come at a point where it has an ability to change the equation. It has an ability that it can accelerate equality for all of us, for the future generations, but it also have an opportunity, and I think it's at a point where it can quickly accelerate inequality as well. And we have a choice to shape this equation where we think it's really going to help us compress those 123 years. If you move on to the next slide, please. And I want to phrase this because all of you, I'm sure, as you said, you are working with AI in some shape or form in your organizations, in your personal lives. And I speak with a lot of organizations. I don't think so access is any longer a problem. Everyone in this room probably has a license that you could give to every employee of yours, or every woman can get get access to a ChatGPT or a Copilot license now because it is available. But I don't think so. Access only would close the gap because the divide that I am seeing, and I'm sure that all of us are experiencing now, isn't just access. It's really what happens next. So access, we can really grant, tick in the box. The organizations are really moving forward at a pace where they are giving access to all of their employees, including male, female, to make sure that they can have some sort of AI tools to use. But the question is now about usage, about confidence, about the opportunity, and about the career progression. And none of these, even though you see them here, none of these follow automatically. Every arrow that you see on this chain is a place where somebody quietly drops off. You have Bridget, you have people in your organization who would think, I don't really know how to use this tool. I don't think so. I trust this tool, or I don't think so that I should be using this tool because it's probably going to be considered as cheating. So there is a drop off that is happening at each stage of this funnel. And you could have same job, same license, two people performing same role. One could be spending the first hour asking AI to rewrite their emails, to draft their update and prep their one-to-ones. And the other one could be just opening it once and thinking, I don't really know how to start, or I don't think so, I am doing this right, closes it and goes back to the hard way, how they were used to do things. 6 months later, who do you think is going to make progress? Who do you think is going to have better career progression? And we all know the answer. We all know the answer that 6 months later, they will be even further behind. And one of them could look like they've had a promotion. Again, same tool and different permission. So I feel as an organization and as leaders, we do have a role to play where we need to talk about each of these stages with people and create role models, create those confidence boosters across each of these stages in funnel where people feel secure, people feel people like them using these technologies, and share stories on how it's helping them, it's helping their peers to move forward. And as I'm talking about this isn't just a framework that I have developed, and it isn't just an anecdote. If we go through the research, there is a research that McKinsey has done. Women report lower confidence using generative AI. And when I spend time with women talking about AI, because it's something I'm really passionate about, how do we build that AI confidence? I do see women are more likely to worry about getting it wrong. Meanwhile, there are people who are experimenting, who are leaning in, learning faster, getting recognized early, and all of that is compounding quietly, invisibly, and fastly. So I think all of us need to make sure how in our organizations we are thinking through not just access, but across all of these tipping points in the funnel. If we move on to the next slide, please. Now, of course, I am, and you could say that you probably, Rakhi, are in a very privileged position because I live and breathe AI and technology working for a technology company. And I am surrounded by people, I am surrounded by stories where people are passionately talking about how AI is helping them, how AI is genuinely transforming business processes, not just individual productivity. And I wanted to share this story because I think it's really, really important to show what happens if the access is given to businesses, to organizations where AI could genuinely make a difference. Now, NHS, I'm sure a lot of you might have spotted this in a lot of social media, that NHS started with a 30,000 user trial across 90 NHS organizations. This was the largest of its kind in global healthcare trial that NHS did. And the findings were quite fascinating. 43 minutes were saved per person on a daily basis, so which is around 5 weeks a year. Now, scale that over to over 500,000 staff, and we know what the numbers look like. So I want you to think about picturing, like if we picture a clinician at 6 p.m. now, who gets home for bedtime, or who gets to look a patient in the eye instead of thinking about how I'm going to remember everything and how I'm going to make sure that I'm doing justice to this patient in terms of writing my notes. And I truly believe that's what productivity means when you zoom in right. You see a lot of stats, you see a lot of organizations talking about the impact AI is having, but I think the real picture is when you zoom in, how it's really helping us build that human agency. And AI here isn't really replacing clinicians, but what it's doing, it's cutting admin, it's lowering that mental load and giving time back to the clinicians, back to the staff, so that they can probably serve people better and listen to them, because that's what we really need when we turn up to a GP or at a hospital. So again, the leadership question here is, who benefits from those 43 minutes? Only the confident, only the people who are confident enough to use the tool, only the people who know how they can use these minutes, how they can use this time to make sure that I can give that time back to things that matter the most. And I think that's the challenge that is sitting on our desk today across all the businesses. If we are not worried about access anymore, it's how do we make sure that we give people confidence that they can genuinely take those minutes back and take that time back. If we move on to the next slide, please. Now, we usually talk about AI across life cycle of an employee, and hiring is just one aspect of it. But I wanted to highlight this here because I'm sure a lot of you are HR leaders, and you really are thinking about how does it really impact the talent life cycle. But what I am seeing is there are lots of use cases bubbling up, how AI can help individuals in HR, can help chief people officers and their staff. But where I'm seeing is there is friction genuinely showing up at every stage of especially female talent life cycle. So I don't need to read out loud, but you can see there are benefits of using AI across each of these stages, from recruit to as you kind of move forward to the lead stage. Now, where I am seeing is especially women, when you think about returning from leave. Imagine you are 9 months out. I have been there last year. I've got an 18-month-old. You come back and the tools have moved. Technology has evolved quite quickly. How we were doing things as a business has changed quite massively. There's a new system, and everyone is suddenly talking about new things like prompts in my case. So the gap you feel isn't really the skill. Again, I think it's the confidence. AI, if used right, could genuinely be the fastest way back in for females, and shouldn't really be one more thing you feel behind on. And which one it is depends entirely on whether someone told you you are allowed to learn out loud, you are allowed to make mistakes. And I literally felt it when I came back from my mat leave last year. Even though I was talking and living AI before I went on mat leave, I genuinely felt like I was so behind. I was so behind because I did not know how quickly things have moved. But where I felt I genuinely was able to catch up in some ways, I'm still catching up, is where I really started sharing those stories with others and talking about how it is helping you build that self-confidence, how it's really helping you to have a career progression talk with your manager or manage one-to-ones, because these are the things that slowly build your confidence in and allows you to make mistakes, learn, because you're seeing role models do these things across your organization. So I believe this is really, really important for us to think about how across all of these stages, we can make sure that women are being represented, but equally women are sharing those stories that is helping them across the talent life cycle. If we move on to the next slide, please. And before I close off, I think it's really really important. Like, what can I do? I know there is an opportunity, and I can see that if nothing being done, the consequences probably aren't going to be great, because we want to compress those 123 years. Every one of these transitions that I've talked about gets easier with AI unless someone isn't really using them and making sure that they are not the psychological safety in the organization is as such that experimentation isn't really seen frowned upon. So I think it's really important for us to think about, are we creating that psychological safety in our organization where we are giving people permission, we are expecting people to experiment safely, share those stories, because I think sharing stories, learning together is the key. And then practical learning, thinking about what's in it for me across the users, across like in HR space, in other spaces where people are using AI, because AI isn't really one fits all tool. It's how do you use it in your job? How do you use it in terms of your own job skills is really, really important. And not just the adoption shouldn't just be measured in vanity metrics, as in how much people are using licenses. It's how teams are feeling confident, how there is equal representation when you are listening to those stories and when you are seeing career progression, because this is how you do an inclusive measure of who's using and who's really benefiting from AI. Move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I am going to leave you with this. And I think, again, hopefully this has been useful. But AI isn't really here to create inequality, but it is going to amplify what's already there. There is an unequal system, and it is moving even faster in whatever direction that system was already heading. So if you remember Bridget in the beginning of my story, writing everything by hand, having access to the tool that could have freed her, if we multiply her by thousands, it's not a technology problem. It's a leadership problem. And we need to make sure that we are thinking about how the organizations that we are part of win with AI doesn't only think about how do we deploy it faster, they are thinking about making sure that everyone has the confidence, the capability, and the permission to use it. Because the next digital divide, I can tell you, won't be who has access to AI, it will be who feels confident enough to use it. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Scott Hollands. I actually head up PSR's Recruit, Train, Deploy service line. And a significant part of the work we undertake is supporting public sector organisations that are championing women in technology across a variety of skills and career paths. So really looking forward to learning more about this area, increasing my own understanding, but also helping raise awareness to what is an incredibly important topic. So before we get into it, firstly, huge thank you to Rakhi. I thought that was a really clear and thought-provoking keynote and a really great way to set the scene for this discussion. I loved the 123 years and the impact that AI could have negatively or positively in closing or widening that gender parity. So we have an expert panel with us today. And to kick us off, Erica, I'm going to come to you first. Erica, based on your experience, where are you already seeing gender differences in AI adoption, and what do you think is driving that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And from what I'm seeing, and I should position, my role within AMS is innovation focused. So I am in this light really privileged in that I'm working alongside a lot of highly influential female leaders who are actively experimenting with AI and actually encouraging responsible use across their teams. So I think I'm very fortunate to be in a position like that and in an organization like ours, where the advancement of AI and automation has been something that we've needed to keep tabs on for quite a long time now. And I really like to dispel this myth that this is a capability situation. I really, Rakhi, liked what you said about the fact that it's not that women can't do it. It's not that people can't do it. It is very much around trust. It is very much around access. It is very much around given parameters and frameworks in which to experiment, and some help, guidance, and role modeling within an organization or within public sector to make sure that those frameworks are clear, how you can experiment safely, what the guidelines are. when we create these environments, really opens up the ability for people to not only learn to use the technology, but really help make it work for them and share their knowledge with others so that you can become more of a systemic enabler, like the example with the NHS, that really drives value. I think the one thing that I do see, even in our own organization, is and EY produced a really great paper on this, the Lane 4 paper that they've published, is that even within organizations, you've got people who are really, really advanced users who are exceptionally curious, and those who learn and adopt based on others' examples. So really harnessing this within your organization becomes really important, and making it a top-down led approach to the use of AI in business or in private sector.
Okay, so if it's more of a confidence gap rather than capability gap, what would you say are the structural or even cultural shifts that need to change to address these, Erica?
Yeah, I can share a little bit about what we've done at AMS, but also what I'm seeing in more of our successful clients where adoption is happening more rapidly. And what we see there is, as I said, top-down strategic objectives that center around not ignoring the fact that AI is there, but really driving AI adoption as a board level, C-suite level strategic objective, and then providing the frameworks and parameters in a programmatic way around that drive leaders to help their teams, and they are measured on this, to help their teams learn and adopt available AI technology within the organization. We do this at AMS. This is led top down. I am measured on identifying new use cases and opportunities to use AI to free up our team's capacity to spend more high value time from a human perspective on tasks, automate those things that are perhaps easier to do with an AI tool. So it's measured. We provide learning and guidance. We have frameworks, and we also continually evolve some of the messaging, the frameworks, and the safe use and application of AI. So it's clear for our people in terms of what they can and should not be doing with AI technology. And organizations who do this usually have something you can see on their front end website, all the way through to how they communicate internally. With these structures in place, plus learning and development that centers around it, this is really the best opportunity to drive success at an organization level or at a government level.
Love that. Thank you, Erica. Anna, I'm going to come to you. Anna, how do gaps in access to training tools or real life application opportunities contribute to female adoption? And a follow-up, what does good inclusive upskilling actually look like in practice for you and Code First Girls?
I think it's important to point out here that there's sort of two different groups, right? And we've got to think about the problem in two ways. The first group is what I would call tech adjacent, right? So that would even include the likes of me. I'm both a CEO and now a prompt engineer, right? I'm very much tech adjacent. And the second group are the deeper tech roles, right? And it's very much the case that across both of these, women are going to be underrepresented in terms of usage, but the difference between the two is quite stark. So for the tech adjacent roles, it's about 39% lower adoption vis-a-vis men. And then if we compare that to the deeper tech roles, it's 80% less, right? So these two groups have very distinct challenges, but one thing I would say is it very, very much feeds into each other. Why does it feed into each other? Because the tech adjacent are essentially the users of the technology, but the deeper tech roles are the makers of the technology and the actual implementers of the technology. And unless we get fair representation amongst both groups, I think we're going to have problems. Okay, so we need to think about them as two groups, but they feed into each other. One thing that I would probably say is that I think there's a general fear in the market at the moment, right? That AI is going to disproportionately affect jobs that are occupied by women. I would say that there is a counter viewpoint to that a lot of people perceive this as a great opportunity if we get this right and if we do it in an inclusive manner. So, for example, things that the government are working on at the moment that I think are really quite exciting. They're doing a great white paper on the digital workforce of 2030. And the way they're coming at this is they very much see AI as additive. Yeah, they very much see this as an opportunity. So that's absolutely great. But I think in terms of just best practice, in terms of our learning interventions, when it comes to existing employees, we actually really focus on the emotional and human connection. What do I mean by that? In a world of AI, right, you can completely go down a rabbit warren and be by yourself, completely by your screen. And I actually think in some ways that puts women off. Can we create learning interventions that actually bring back human connection and a sense of an ability to emote emotionally? And when we do that, we find women respond far better to the training process. Just coming back really quickly to the deeper tech roles. So representation in that layer is absolutely critical if you want your organization to adopt AI. And that's very much around overcoming some of the structural barriers to both entry into technology and how you retain those technical roles. So for us, that's very much around efforts of creating the largest, talent pool for AI trained women in the UK, and make sure that we're getting greater representation and getting them into the civil service through fantastic things like the PSR.
Fantastic. Really clear. Thank you for that. I'm going to stick with you just for one other thing. So from a leadership lens, Anna, do leaders need to choose, in your opinion, between pace and inclusion, or is that a false trade-off in itself?
It's a really interesting question, because the vast majority of organizations that I work with just on the pace front have actually, I think, gone into what I call AI paralysis. And what I mean by that is that a lot of them are sitting there thinking, we're going to create a workforce plan for the year. We are unsure about the skills that we're going to need in 2 years' time. It will take a year to create that workforce plan. And by the time they create that workforce plan, it's typically out of date. In which time it's completely scuppered their hiring plans. They haven't brought any new talent in. And I think that paralysis is causing a considerable problem when it comes to entry and mid-level talent that we're still going to need. So when we build talent at Code First Girls, and the way we get through this with organizations is that we very much have to give them the confidence that we are creating talent for 2030, right? We've made quite significant bets on the type of talent we think is going to be really important for 2030, and we've already baked it into our thinking. So for us, that's essentially, and it would be very important within the civil service, systems thinkers and systems architecture. Doesn't matter what happens with AI, that is going to be the biggest need that's going to exist by 2030, and we're already doing it. In my view, you don't have to create a workforce plan over that. The need is here, it's now, but not taking on talent is just as dangerous. So you've got to strike this balance, right, between don't enter the paralysis, don't fall into that trap, but equally when you're building, do it mindfully and make sure that you are doing it inclusively. But that doesn't mean stopping altogether. That is the biggest trap of all within AI, I think.
It's fantastic. I love the AI paralysis. I've not heard it like that before. Very well put. Sophie, thank you for being patient. Very keen to bring you in at this stage. So we've heard a lot there, but in your opinion, do you think this is fundamentally a skills issue, a confidence issue, or a leadership issue? And who actually is accountable for fixing it?
I think a lot of that's been covered, and I agree with everything that's already been said. The same with, I also run alongside HeyFlow a community called Motherboard, which is a lot of mid-career women that have gone on maternity leave and returned. And what I would say is that within that community, everyone is very much at the forefront of experimenting with AI, really excited about it on the journey. And as Anna said, then when you see the tech adjacent workforce and women within that workforce, it's a very different story as to how that's being adopted. So I completely agree on those areas. I think one of the challenges that's cropped up, and it's also coming up in the questions that I'll feed into this question around it being a leadership issue. The challenge that we see at HeyFlow, because we look at the female talent lifecycle, attracting, retaining and promoting, there is a there is always this wobble point that happens on women returning from maternity leave, no matter how brilliant they are, no matter how much they've tried to, you know, keep attuned to everything going on in the workplace during their maternity leave. But I've seen women that have had hugely successful careers, especially in tech roles or tech adjacent roles, that have then returned from maternity leave and have been absolutely broken on their return to work, a complete shadow of who they were before. So I think that area that's been mentioned in the chat around that being a really important part, and that is a leadership issue. So if we then, you know, look at AI adoption, if we look at returning, if we look at mid-career, if we look at how women are moving through the talent process and the life cycle, we have to look at these kind of blind spots that exist and then work out actually how we're going to make sure that the confidence is there, as we've discussed, that then it isn't a skills issue through upskilling, but also how leadership are looking at not just AI, but how they're looking at inclusion, how they're looking at their gender pay gaps, how they're looking at DEI responses, and not just look at it as an AI issue. And I think that's what we're finding at HeyFlow at the moment, is that lots of organisations are putting a hold on really creating change within these moments and these blind spots that exist within the female talent life cycle, and are looking solely at how do we adopt AI across the organisation. And then what we're starting to see is those problems aren't being fixed. So I would say it's definitely a leadership issue, and looking at it holistically. And as Anna said, you know, really looking at the whole picture as to how this impacts the workforce and where we're going, and how women are potentially going to be left behind. But yeah, so I think leadership issue comes first, then it's a confidence issue, and then it's a skills issue.
All right. So if we don't address it, let's just say nothing happens, what is the real consequences, not just for individuals, but for the public sector capability and ultimately future leadership?
I really am concerned that the gender pay gap will widen for, you know, for the public sector, but also across many organisations across the UK. We're going to see potentially this gap widening. I think that women that are confident in this, and women that have role models and people that are, you know, really kind of looking at actually how do we make sure women adopt AI and are confident in using it, that's, you know, we'll see those gaps starting to close. But I think the biggest area of concern is around progression. There's, you know, there is a lot of emphasis around entry level, and that's brilliant. But I think the progression point where we start to see women trail off and women's careers stall or completely end, and I'm sure we all know women that we've seen that have left their careers, that have had incredible careers, and should have been retained. So I think, yeah, looking at that progression point across the whole talent life cycle and how we make sure that AI is baked into that, and learning is equally adopted. So yeah, so I think really looking at kind of the long-term aspirations of an organisation and the long-term impacts that this is potentially going to have if we're not looking at it from from the whole picture.
Yeah, that's really interesting points. I wonder, Anna, I might ask you to step back a little bit on this, but could you share some examples of approaches or initiatives that you've seen work well in driving particularly that inclusive adoption piece?
Yeah, so I mean, we work with lots of different government organisations, so particularly successful examples that you'll probably find if you Google today, right, would probably be the likes of like the Cabinet Office. We work with Parliament, IPO. We've got a very famous relationship with the likes of GCHQ. So these have all been highly successful examples, and I think the approach that we have taken here is very much around reinvestment and the ecosystem. So on average, for every one woman that we will place within the civil service, we've reinvested back in 10 women in local communities of your choice. The reason that we essentially do that is because we have to make sure that the pipeline is really strong. We believe the way to do that is through driving curiosity and education that is commensurate with a woman's existing experience level. So what do I mean by that? Do not put a mid-level technical woman on an entry-level program. right? It doesn't work like that. Tailor something for them that enables them to go to the next level within a specific frontier technology like AI. So we've worked very, very hard to make sure that there are tailored programs for different groups of women. They are deliberately focused on local communities where you want to build pipelines. And that is incredibly important for the civil service and also for the changes that are potentially coming in government, right? We are going to see, I think, greater moves towards local investment, probably outside of London. How have we built the pipelines and the community ecosystems to make sure that we've got a really healthy pipeline of women in those specific communities? We have to do it through a reinvestment approach. We have to make sure that there's lots of women coming through the process and that they're essentially work ready at different levels for civil service departments that are placed all across the country. So yes, I do think it's going to go more local. I do think we need national strategy and oversight around it to create a very joined up approach. But I think that this reinvestment and ecosystem approach is the best way to overcome what I perceive to be the structural barriers, right? And not just getting women in, but coming back to Sophie's point, we spend probably more money actually looking at the retention and acceleration of the women that are already in technology. So increasingly it's moving towards the whole life cycle. And we have to think about it as the whole life cycle and the career life cycle, not just getting women in at the beginning, how we move them through.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Erica, I'm going to come to you. Look, you spoke about people, and Rakhi, about people feeling able to experiment and learn. We work for an organization that has created that. What would your advice be to the leader of an organization who hasn't considered that and they're just embarking upon that process? Where should they start?
I think the operative word there is start. This, you don't have to get this perfect out of the gate. I think it's really important to start thinking about it, to start initiating programs that center around it. You don't have to use this on their own. There's quite a lot of content out there at the moment. I mentioned, for example, the paper that's been released by EY. A lot of the big four firms have actually come out with papers around how you can get this started, but making sure that it's led top down, that you're not only just thinking about, and I think Anna, you've said it, and I think Rakhi said it as well, giving the tools is not enough. You really need to think about how you are going to provide some competence, some learning and capability around it. Even at AMS, like some of us had the tool before we actually had some of the training. We've subsequently rolled that out, and it is very much part of leadership down objectives and how we are measured in terms of success and how we're driving change effectively. But you don't have to have a perfect program, but you should get started. And I think some of the key things there are thinking about where your easiest use cases, where you can get some examples, and maybe even just start like the NHS example. That was quite a big sample. You can do this in a smaller company with maybe one department where you get some real use case under your belts, and then you work with those teams to share what they've learned and roll that out more effectively across other parts of your business. And actually having those role models and those examples of people who've leveraged them in practice. And I really like what both Sophie and Anna said around making it specific to the job and the actual tasks and the level of employee that you are. So not just AI for the sake of it, but something that is designed thoughtfully to actually enhance what it is that you're doing. I think that is really important. It needs to have purpose. It needs to be something that's going to address or save time or enhance what a worker is already doing. What I would say is the biggest challenge organizations have is the impact on people's roles and how they explain with the introduction of AI and automation, how that actually impacts the role of the individual or individuals doing those jobs. So careful thinking around that and being brave to take an iterative approach to it as well. So understanding that this is going to change over time. You're not suddenly going to change everyone's job description because you've introduced one AI tool. It is going to be a continuous journey and a continuous investment either at the organizational level as well as at the government national level to ensure that we've got, we're really narrowing those gaps for the future. But absolutely iteration, I think, would be key.
Really sound advice. Thank you, Erica. Sophie, as AI adoption accelerates, what should organizations be prioritizing over the next 12 to 18 months to avoid widening the gaps? I mean, they can immediately do.
I think, firstly, measuring adoption by demographic groups. I think it was mentioned in the chat. What about underrepresented, demographics within women as well? So I think measuring that. I think, just coming back to my HeyFlow work, measuring is one of the most challenging parts of women's inclusion in the workplace. And we found that with lots of organisations where their end of year employee survey will say one thing, and then we go in and we run separate surveys and we find out that there's something else that's a challenge. So I think really breaking down measurement adoption, understanding it better, and really understanding the challenges behind that adoption, not just are they adopting it, are they not. The second, focusing on confidence building and education, which I know has been covered a lot. Within that, I think there also needs to be confidence building and education runs through, I imagine, the work that all of us do around how do you really get leaders to understand this? How do you get individuals to adopt AI? And when you look at behaviours in the workplace, what we do, because our work is backed by behavioural science, is we look at expressed needs, unexpressed needs, and latent needs. Expressed needs are the things that people can ask for clearly. So they can say, I need a tool for AI to do whatever I need to do in my day job. Your unexpressed needs would be the stuff that maybe they can't ask for. And then the latent needs being the piece that they don't even know that they need yet. And when you look at the female talent life cycle and you look at women being supported in the workplace, often the way that we remove barriers is through the latent needs. It's the stuff that people don't even know they need yet. It's the stuff that they can't ask for, they can't explain. And that's going to be the same thing around this adoption. It's really understanding actually how can we support individuals that maybe don't have the confidence to adopt AI, or they don't quite understand how it's going to impact their job, and how do we get them to be able to articulate these pieces and think ahead of that. Visible role models, a simple one, but has always been important within, getting women to be interested in technology, etc. And then the fourth one, that redesign, and as Anna was saying, not just looking at something that's going to be obsolete in a year. Yeah. What actually can we, what actually needs to be designed, and how can this all of the stuff that we've spoken about today be baked into that process? So yeah, a few suggestions there.
just a couple, but all very valid and relevant. And just popped into my head. The challenge we face now is people are adopting to AI, right? It's something that's there and people are having to get used to it. Do you think younger generations who are growing up with AI are going to have the same challenge from a gender perspective? I'll put that to anyone. Anna, you're shaking your head.
I don't actually. I think there's something really important to take away from this. And I've been just looking at the chat, right? Like, for example, the comment around permission to experiment creates confidence. And this might be a little bit controversial, but whenever you look through history at the introduction of a new technology, right, and you can chart this back all the way to the Industrial Revolution, but let's go to the last one, right, which is basically computing. It goes through a cycle, and the cycles are identical, right? And the cycles are, first it starts at the top with a really exclusive bunch of people that only have that AI knowledge. Invariably, they're going to be men, right? Then you get a top-down approach where the organization's like, right, we've got to put guardrails and rules in around this. And what's the next stage? Bottom up, grassroots engagement and adoption. That's going to be challenging for organizations, because that's basically acknowledging that every single one of us are consumers and curious and can learn about it ourselves. So, for example, I'd probably challenge anyone on the call and say, your organization, if you're in the civil service, is most likely to give you Copilot. Why, as a consumer, are you not, you're probably using Gmail compare it to Gemini, see what Gemini can do. This is very much bottom up now. And what's going to be interesting, I think, with the new generation coming through, a lot of them are already AI native because they've not got the parameters and the guardrails, sometimes of a corporation, telling them what to do.
That's a really good
They
point.
have grown up as natives. So this is like now the next phase of adoption where really it's up to, I think, the individual, and it's up to your curiosity. Go and read about Claude and Fable 5 and Mythos and the importance of AI sovereignty. Go and compare the tools across your own G Suite. If you're not doing this, you're missing the trick, because seeing other tools and comparing how you can work across all of them gives you a massive edge vis-a-vis a packet of training that your organization is going to give you. Sorry, that's quite a controversial point, but that's what I think.
I don't think that's controversial. Thank you for putting that out there. I can see Erica agreeing profusely on the top of my screen there. Listen, we're coming to the end of this conversation. I think it has been really thought-provoking. So thank you, everybody, for being involved. Question to you all in just a few words, and I'll start with Erica. What would you like the leaders in our audience to take away from today? One thing.
Lead from the top down, but also consider the bottom up, and how you can encourage your workforce to contribute actually to how AI can make their roles better for the future.
Excellent. Sophie.
I would hope that leaders would be going to their HR teams, their talent teams, to all different kind of senior leadership team, and actually working out a plan that looks at this from a female talent lifecycle perspective, and work out, do they actually know where their blind spots are, where women are dropping off, why they're dropping off, and then how can AI be baked into that, be supported to make sure that those drop-offs don't get larger. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. Anna, we finish on you.
If your tech teams are not representative of the companies that you serve, you're going to find it much harder to drive AI adoption across the wider workforce. And equally, I think you're not going to necessarily create services and users that are representative of society. And I think that is really critical for the civil service to do.
Brilliant. I think that is 3 very pointy, key, relevant things to be putting out there. Look, Erica, Anna, Sophie, thank you so much for making yourselves available today, and to Rakhi and Mel for opening us up. I think that's been a really interesting session. I think there's been lots of rich, practical discussion. There is opportunity here, and I think if we collectively get this right, it's obvious that AI can be a powerful enabler, not just of productivity, but of access to opportunity, progression, and influence across the public sector. And at PSR, we're in a unique position, as previously mentioned, to support with access to specialist and unique suppliers like HeyFlow and Code First Girls through our models of recruit, train, deploy, or procurement services offerings. So if you would like to know more, or if you have any questions from our panel following this event, please let us know by completing the feedback form that we've put into the chat. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great rest of the day and an enjoyable week. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much.